Hello, let's talk about a very useful concept when it comes to animating environments. It's called parallax. It's actually a phenomenon that happens when you move forward or backwards. The objects near you moves faster in the opposite direction that you're traveling, and when the objects gets farther away, they move less. Now, if you look at this animation, the foreground elements, which are trees, they move really fast, and the trees in the distance, they still move, but not that much, and the buildings even less, and the clouds, you can barely see any movement, and the sun, which is like millions of kilometers away, actually never moves. So this behavior gives you a lot of depth if you animate it that way rather than this way. I mean, if you look at this animation, it's much like a 2D image animating in x-axis. And now, if you still can't see it, let's hide the vehicles. Now, what you see is just a 2D image moving in x-axis. Now, when you're traveling on a vehicle, you never see sun passing your window like that, like a bird passing your window. You never see that. So let's bring the vehicles back on. And now, still with the vehicles animating, this is just a 2D move. And let's look at this one again. Now, this one, even though it's a 2D illustration, it's realistic. It has depth in it. So this is what you called parallax. So you have to animate this behavior. Otherwise, it would look like a 2D animation, a 2D image animating in x-axis. So in order to do that, you have to understand parallax. So let's look at parallax in a way that we can understand. So parallax is a bit of a scientific topic to discuss. If you search it on Google, you'll see there are a lot of information there. Let's omit all the trigonometry and physics for now, because we are not scientists. We are artists. So let's talk about parallax in a way that we can understand. That is enough for us, in a way that so that we can implement it. When we animate environments. All right. Let's say that there's a road and you're traveling on the road in a car, and there are 4 objects. There's a house by the road, and there's a tree a little further away from the house, and there's a mountain a bit further away, and there's a cloud in the distance. Let's think for a moment that there's a person in the house looking at your car. His head is locked onto the car, and there's another guy on the tree looking at your car. There's another one on the mountains looking at your car. And there's another one on the clouds, hypothetically, one looking at your car. So how much their head has to turn to look at your car from their point of view? The amount of head rotation they have to do to look at your car depends on the distance from the car. It looks like this. That angle red is the amount of head rotation that the person in the house has to do. The yellow angle is the amount of head rotation the person on the tree has to do. The white colored angle is the one on the mountain has to do. The black colored one is the guy on the cloud has to do. And you can see these angles are different, and they're getting smaller and smaller when they get further away from the car. That's what's important. So let's take each of these person's point of view. So this is what the guy in the house would see. You see a lot of movement because he's just by the road looking at the car. He has to do a lot of head rotation. And this is what the guy on the tree would see. He doesn't have to. He still has to rotate his head quite a bit, but not as much as the one in the house. This is a guy on the mountain, not as much as the other guys. The guy on the cloud actually has almost a bird's eye view. You just have to barely move his head to look at the car. So what you have to get away from this is that when you're further away from the car, the head rotation, the movement that you have to do is less. Let's look at this again. Let's call this, actually these angles, red color, red, yellow, white, and black angles, they are called angular distance. Let's not go into technicalities now. This angular distance actually getting smaller and smaller when the objects are further away from the car. Now, vice versa is also true. The opposite is also true, which means, let's say that you're in the car, sitting in the back seat, looking out the window at a 90-degree angle, and the car is traveling. And this is what you would see. Let's look, that's the house, all right? House just passed like very fast. Why? It's because it's near you. You see a lot of movement. Tree, still it's fast, but not as much as the house. The mountain, not as much as the tree or the house. And look at the cloud. There's a movement, but very little. Let's put them all together. This is what you would see when you put them all together. It's the same scene that you've seen earlier. Now, that's the parallax effect. The cloud just barely moves. Mountain moves, but not as much. The tree moves a bit faster than even that. And the house passes you really fast. So this is parallax. So how did I do this? I just placed a camera on the car and placed the objects in z-axis. Once you do that, you don't have to animate anything. The parallax is calculated because Adobe has programmed the comp camera that way. It simulates a parallax effect when you place the objects in z-axis. It behaves that way because it's programmed that way. So you might be wondering, so why do we care about parallax if the comp camera does it automatically? Why do we have to know this? It's because that the scale is wrong. Right now, we are traveling like 100 meters. Let's say that we're traveling 100 meters. Well, let's look at 100 meters in z-axis. The house looks fine. It's like 3 meters away from the road. And yeah, tree is fine. It's like 60 meters away from the road. But the mountain is definitely not 100 meters away. It has to be like at least, I don't know, 1 kilometer away, 2 kilometers away. And the cloud, it has to be even more than that. Clouds actually starts at around 10,000 feet. It's like 300 meters. That's just the height. What about the distance? Distance is like, in this case, it should be like 2 kilometers. So this scale is wrong. So if we are making the scene in the proper scale, it should be like this. Look at how big the scene is. Our main animation, the car animation, you can barely see them, and the cloud is so much far away, and creating scenes in this scale inside After Effects is actually a nightmare. It's actually difficult even in 3D software as well. In 3D software we can do that, but in After Effects things can get messy. So that's why we have to understand parallax. That's why we have to understand this concept correct. And once you understand this, it's very easy. You don't even need a camera. You don't even need 3D layers. You can just animate them in a way that you can simulate parallax. That's what we're going to do next. Let's look at a scene and animate it. So let's start by importing the images. Now this is a design I got from Envato Elements. I've separated the layers so I can animate them separately. Let's scale it down. Now the background is actually white at the moment. Let's fill it up with a ramp. Let's choose a nice blue color and a light yellow color. Let's adjust it a little bit. Yeah, like that. Now the sun is like several millions of kilometers away, so 150 million kilometers away for exact. So you don't have to move it because that movement is not visible at all. For the clouds also, you can leave it static, but in this case, let's move it a little bit, very subtle movement. So yeah, you can see a very subtle movement there. And next is to add the distant buildings. These buildings, the building layer, which is supposed to be the farthest away buildings in the city. So let's move it a little bit more, much more than the cloud layer, because they are much closer than the clouds. Yeah, they have to move more than the clouds. Now these are the foreground buildings, the buildings which are closer to the camera, much more close to the camera than the distant buildings, so they have to move more. All right, the objects getting closer to the camera, they have to move more. All right, now you can see that those foreground buildings are moving much more than the background. Now these trees are even closer, so let's duplicate these layers and move them quite a bit. Even that movement doesn't look good, doesn't look enough, so let's move even more. Now look at that. Now the depth is starting to build up. Next is to, yeah, that looks good. Next, add the road layer. This road is actually even closer than the trees, so let's duplicate these layers about 4 times, because we need a lot of length here, so we can animate and move it in x-axis a lot. So yeah, let's do that. Let's animate in x-axis a lot more than the trees. So let's see. Yeah, trees seems to be floating on the air, so let's fix that later. But anyway, now the road, look at those lamp posts. They're moving much more than the trees. Let's add the foreground, these little bushes on the foreground, and they don't have to move much more than the road, because they're just by the road. They have to move a little bit more than the road. Yeah, like so. Let's actually create even more depth next by duplicating the tree layer and bringing it to making another foreground layer of trees. Let's get it up, and yeah, we need, now these trees are very much closer to the camera, and which means they have to move really fast. They have to move really fast, because of that we need a lot of layers. Let's move them quite a bit. All right, we need to move them even more. So yeah, that should do it. All right, now they're moving a lot. Look at that depth. None of these layers are 3D. They are not distributed in 3D. There's no camera, but because we moved them systematically, now the depth is being created. So next is to add some motion blur, because those trees are moving quite fast here. All right, by adding a directional blur. Actually, that's not real motion blur because there's no camera here. All right, adding vehicles is pretty easy. Just add those vehicles like so, and parent them to the road layer. Road layer is already animated, so the vehicles will be moving along with it. So let's animate the vehicles separately. All right, let's rearrange layers so depth is sorted. That black car has to move behind those foreground cars. All right, this is how it's going to look like. Look at that depth. So I moved everything up a little bit to create a better composition. So that's how you can animate objects, the environments, and simulate parallax. Actually, we did very simple stuff here. We just moved elements in different speeds. That's what we did. Basically, that's what we did. So let's look at this one again. Now you can see the difference. Now this has no depth. Look at how the sun behaves. Sun passed you like a bird. So no, this is not the way to go. If you're animating a scene like this is not the way to go. You really have to separate the layers. Either move them in a z-axis and animate the camera, which is I really don't like. Or the easiest way is that if it is a scene like this, then you can move the 2D elements in a way that it can simulate parallax. So that's how you can do it. So that's it. I hope you found it informative and you enjoyed it. And let me know what you think in the comments. And if you want me to discuss any other concept in the future, let me know that in the comments as well. And I'll see you in another video really soon. All right, bye bye.